Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for attending the DataON Virtual Academy webinar series. We have a very exciting content to share with you today. We have audience from Europe, audience in the US, and also I think a couple of people is joining from Australia. So thank you for joining. I think it's evening at your night. So today's topic, we'll be talking about deploying and migrating your virtual desktop infrastructure workload on Microsoft Azure Stack HCI or migrating into a Windows virtual desktop environment on Azure. We have a very unique audience today, and also a presenter that will share with their experience technology to see how that technology works and how different workload could really be optimized in an Azure Stack HCI environment. So our two presenters today is Doug, Chief Technology Officer from Numecent, one of our partners that we're working with to continue to proliferate the requirement for our customer, especially on app side and migrations. We also have Henry Fu, who is DataON's Technical Program Manager, who will talk about really the virtual desktop environment, the workloads, how Microsoft deployed that solution on an Azure Stack HCI solution. Housekeeping items, please mute during the webinar for the audience. If you have questions, feel free to use the chat window on the right to present your chat. If you need to reach us afterwards, so we all have our Twitter accounts, so feel free to tweet us or email us if you have any questions, and we're happy to follow up. So for me, I have done this now, 8 weeks in a row, given the tough time we have with a challenging time with a lot of us working from home. We continue to want to use the opportunity to reach our audience and present a valuable content for you guys to understand what are the challenges you face as an IT admin and IT administrators. And the journey that we always talk about is the hybrid cloud journey, where we believe it's kind of the world that a lot of us are living in the IT and technology, and how to take advantage of the technology we have today. In this journey that you take in no particular order, you'll see that as decision makers in technology infrastructure, you have to look at these key buckets, I said, in your decision process. And as you go through this decision, you'll see how everything comes together, and really somehow you have to manage them together. Managing legacy app infrastructure, it's one of the key challenges. And today, actually, coincidentally, with Numecent, they really address this topic, right? How do you manage legacy apps in a new infrastructure or new applications? If you have an application that's running on Windows 7s and you want to now move to Windows 10, how do you manage those legacy apps so in a new infrastructure you could still run this application seamlessly, efficiently, and with right performance for your workload? So you'll hear that piece today. Defining the strategy for your cloud on premises. This is the struggle that a lot of our technology partners are talking about, and our customer. How do you make sure that as you deploy new applications, should I run it in the cloud or should I run it on premise? What are the advantages of those? And there's pros and cons in both, and the goal is to make sure you guys understand the process. As we continue to see infrastructure consolidation, you'll see that Microsoft Azure Stack HCI and HCI as a totality, as an infrastructure, continue to be a preferred infrastructure as you consolidate your older technology infrastructures. And the advantage you get with smaller footprint, better performances, better management application is what we see in the HCI world, especially with Microsoft Azure Stack HCI. Looking at modernizing the app with container and Kubernetes, right? These are very pressing topics that people are talking about in emerging technology that we believe will really help our customers. Ultimately, delivering these in a hybrid cloud environment where you could take advantage of on-premise infrastructure and also take advantage of the cloud infrastructure that you can move application between the two and make sure you have the right solution for your workloads. In terms of size, without going to all the numbers, you'll see this market continue to show growth, right? The HCI market is a $12 billion market that continue to grow based on IDC. Container Kubernetes is a huge market that years ago has not been that big, but with the emergence of new technology, how you deploy applications, virtualization versus container becomes a discussion topic with VMs. So you can see that's a huge market growth. As we talk to many customers, we also learned that a lot of them are looking at the benefit of hybrid cloud and why IT leaders continue to look at as a discussion topic, why deploying a hybrid cloud could be the right direction because you can't have everything on the cloud. You don't want everything on premise, but really a hybrid infrastructure is the right way to go. And lastly, data continue to grow, and storage data is coupled, right? So having that solution in place is very important as you continue to address the influx of data you need from your users. When we talk about a hybrid cloud or hybrid infrastructure, I think it's important for us to kind of relate to the world that at least DataON and our partner lives in, which is Microsoft. We believe having the ability to manage a infrastructure that's both cloud-based and on-premise based is very important. Microsoft introduced the concept of our Azure Arc hybrid cloud services in Ignite last year when many of our customers attended. You'll learn that ability to have Azure Arc to manage a multi-cloud environment is very critical because you don't have to pick Azure. You can use AWS, Google, but having a layer of management platform that sees both is also allows you to have that flexibility as an IT admin. More importantly, if you look on-premise, you have to look at the fact that how do I manage the data center workload we have, predominantly workload like SQL workload, your file share workload, your VDI workload. How do I manage that on an on-premise infrastructure? And is Azure Stack HCI the right solution for me? You have a lot of edge. Many of our customers have multiple offices, hundreds of offices across the edge. How do you manage that to make sure that you have the right visibility into that infrastructure? So that ability to manage also is a very critical piece and where we believe Azure Arc can solve. But more importantly, I think a couple of weeks back we talked about data governance, which is security, ability to do air gapping of your solution when you deploy backup. All these are critical pieces as you deploy your infrastructure to make sure that data governance is foremost in your mind. And DataON and our partner continue to have these conversations with you to make sure you're comfortable as you're architecting your solution. From a big picture perspective, DataON is a Microsoft, really exclusive Microsoft company that focusing on delivering the complete stack of Microsoft Azure Stack, which is really the Microsoft solution to deliver a hyper-converged infrastructure running Windows Server 2019. And DataON deliver that infrastructure that's validated. We have extension to help manage that infrastructure on premises, and we work with you to connect all these infrastructure to the cloud through the Windows Admin Center, so you can take advantage of the Azure services, the Azure side recoveries, blob storage, file storage, all these features are available in Azure that you could take advantage while having a on-premise hyper-converged infrastructure running Windows. The technology has been around for 10 years. DataON, as a company, has deployed this solution to many, many customers in multiple verticals, in multiple regions. We have many customers in Europe. Our partner based in Netherlands continue to help us, our European customer in UK, Germany, the Nordics, to help deploy the solution. We have companies that's in nonprofit, federal, state, local government, professional service, manufacturing, financial. All of them are taking advantage of the hyper-converged software-defined infrastructure that Microsoft built to help manage your legacy workload, to manage your converged workload, your file share workload, your SQL workload, your VDI workload, to ensure that you have a solution that is enterprise resilient and scalable and flexible to help you deploy that solutions. So please do continue to evaluate this as a technology of choice to make sure you can continue to understand what is the right solution for you. In the last couple weeks, we've been talking about workloads. We talked about running your workload on the edge, running Azure Stack HCI. We talked about you could build a storage scale-out storage server that could be petabyte repository running the same software-defined architecture. Last week we talked about SQL, how you develop a SQL cluster running Azure Stack HCI and get the benefit of always on, always available, and get performance you get millions of IOPS. So you could see that different workload and application as Hyper-V you could run on this hyper-converged infrastructure. This week, with all the challenging time we're facing with COVID-19, virtual desktop implementation and ability to help our worker work remotely has been a foremost thought process in our IT customers. And we believe Microsoft Azure Stack HCI has that capability of supporting large-scale virtual desktop implementation. In the Microsoft world, you call remote desktop sessions, but the key is ability to have managing all your workers so they can work remotely. And our partners today in Numecent will talk about how they take a piece of application acceleration to ensure that your application that you're trying to incorporate into your virtual desktop infrastructure are compatible across multiple generation OSs. And these are all the ecosystem value chain that we want to address as we talk to our customers. Without further ado, I'll pass it to Henry, who will talk about how to deploy Microsoft-based solution in Azure Stack HCI. Go ahead, Henry.
Thanks, Howard. Hi, everybody. So today I'm going to talk about virtual desktop infrastructure, and this is a generic term that's used, but in a Microsoft world, basically, it's remote desktop services. So what is that, right? What is VDI? It basically is that the centrally managed environment for your users to basically remote into that environment to work on their workloads for your desktop environments. And basically, this is instead of purchasing individual laptops or desktops for each user with X amount of CPU and memory, and that basically hoping that they utilize it fully. That if not, then you're kind of wasting your money in a way. But instead, you have perhaps like a thin client or lighter client, and then leverage centralized compute and memory and storage to help to serve your workloads. And it could be because they are call centers or other workers that are basically constantly in flux, and that they basically are tasked with certain work that's quite repetitive, perhaps, or that it could be in a research lab that really you don't have room for everybody to have a desktop, and that you basically you have to have a terminal or some type that basically that give them the ability to access their own little space, but at the same time you don't have all these assets all over the place. So the VDI basically gives you that flexibility as to how you want to handle the workload, and also how to manage on the back end side. So basically, we think that for Azure Stack HCI, that for the back end with nodes from 2 to 16 nodes, and 4 petabytes of storage, and on a per server basis, you can have like 1.5 terabytes of memory, and lots and lots of CPUs cores. That basically this is the environment that you can build and grow as you build out the VDI environment. Okay, so like Howard said, what's driving the adoption? It is we see that it's based a lot of workers who might have had a desktop in their office. Suddenly they need to work from home, and what do you do, right? So it perhaps it's basically just a browser based environment that basically at least they can have a desktop through the browser and do their work from home. Or it could be, in a business continuity or disaster recovery, that you have to plan out that, okay, so what if people can't go into the office for, something happened to the primary site, right? How you have to certainly have your infrastructure in a DR location, but how do the workers, how they actually, run applications? Well, you're going to have some mechanism for that. And also with VDI is, being centrally managed, that you can have a lot more control over the policies and the activities that's basically allowed according to your individual company's standards and stuff. So and then the other part is hypercloud, right? Numecent is going to be talking about some of the cloud portion, but basically, there is really, Microsoft has acknowledged that not everybody's going to move to Azure, especially not all their workloads. That there are people going to have workloads that are on premises or and have some in the cloud, and that the percentage could be different for each one depending on their comfort and and what's best for the organization. So from VDI, from a Microsoft Azure Stack HCI perspective, basically is to leverage like a DataON validated HCI solution that we go through, get the right components and run the validation tests that Microsoft deems it to be a valid compliant system for running Azure Stack HCI. And basically we go through stress tests and all that kind of stuff. And basically this is the base that you would run VDI workloads from, right? You build up the cluster, you add in Hyper-V, and you add the VMs, and then set up failover cluster and storage spaces direct, and all those components build up to the environment that you can run VDI workloads in a cluster environment. And then basically with that cluster environment, then you have highly available workloads and create additional virtualization hosts or remote session hosts to scale out your environment for all the users, and manage it through update management or Azure Update Management for all the patching, or Windows Admin Center for all the on-premises environment setup, and then basically set up the unified security management like the Azure Threat Protection, the Defender Threat Protection, and all those components to basically add layers of security into your environment. So when we talk about VDI, there's really now, Azure has come up with WVD, and basically that is the environment that is pre-configured in some ways for virtual desktops, right? So that the complexity of building it locally is kind of goes away a little bit, and that you just fill in the information you need and numbers of users you plan to have, and then they'll spin up the workloads. The other option is basically to do it on premises, where you have a lot more control, and that within that on-premises world, then you have Microsoft virtual desktop infrastructure, or basically the session-based hosts, where basically you have instead of VDI, where you have VMs for each user, sessions basically is focused on having single VM or a single server to be hosting multiple users in a multi-session world. So I'll get into some of the pros and the differentiations in a few slides from now. Oh, actually this one. So basically for the on-premises, then you have the session-based, as I mentioned. So in that world, the personalization is okay, but it's good, but definitely not as as personalized as a personal VM that each user would have. Application compatibility, well, for a session, because it's a single VM for multiple users, then some application compatibility maybe it will depend. Whereas if you actually have VMs in a pool or personalized environment, then application compatibility should be very minimal, or incompatibility will be minimal. Ease of management, definitely from a management perspective, having just a handful of VMs to support hundreds of users is going to be much easier than having either pooled or personal VMs for each of your users. And in cost effectiveness, just for the sake of management and also resources, the session base is going to provide a much better cost effectiveness versus having individual VMs with certain cores and certain memory for each user, either in a pooled or personal environment. So those are some of the differences for the on-premises. So for deploying VDI on Azure Stack HCI, we actually have a link that's above the, right underneath a little cloud on the corner, that we have a deployment guide as to basically how you would build out the Azure Stack HCI, the core environment, and then the steps to set up the additional pieces for VDI. So definitely take a look at that. And then getting to the Microsoft WVD side of it, basically this is a new environment that they have come out with, new offering, and basically it delivers the multi-session Windows 10 virtual desktop experience. So sort of like what I mentioned in terms of the session base, in an on-premise world, the multi-session is using Windows 2016, Windows Server 2019 type of server-based sessions. Whereas with Microsoft WVD, they give you the ability to do Windows 10 multi-sessions. And then enable the optimization for Office 365, and they give you the migrate the RDS environment to Azure, and then like I mentioned earlier, setting up, they make it easy for you to really set up the environment in Azure, because a lot of those components already pre-set up for you, so that you just have to fill in some information, and then they'll glue everything together and basically create that environment for you. And with that, I'll pass it over to Doug, who's going to talk about deploying migrating VDI workloads on WVD.
Great, thank you, Henry. Hello, everyone. First, thank you to Howard and DataON for inviting me here today. I will give a quick overview of Numecent for those of you that are not familiar with us. Numecent started as a DARPA-funded technology out of UCI and launched in 2012. We're headquartered in Irvine, California, but we have offices in EMEA and in the Asian region with a lot of different companies that we work with, both in the US, Europe, UK, Asia, Japan. Our vision is really to simplify the management and deployment of all Windows applications onto modern workspace environments, modern desktops. And today specifically, we'll talk about WVD, the Microsoft virtual desktop offering that Henry introduced. To achieve this, we created technology, cloud paging, and we have over 50 patents, really the most in the end user compute space in this area. And we're obviously a Microsoft partner. Let's see. So what is cloud paging? So I'll give a brief overview here and then get into more details later. Cloud paging is really the ability to take, again, any Windows application, put it inside a container, wrap it with some management to make it easy to deliver those applications and provision them to any sets of users or groups of users, desktops at scale. We don't need to install the application. That means there's no modification that's needed to the base OS. Everything is virtualized and runs at native speeds, especially for VDI and WVD. So then let's talk a little bit about WVD. So this is just a high-level architecture review. So Microsoft introduced WVD last year, very exciting, and they take care of various aspects and, like Henry said, setting it up. So they have this middle section here that talks about what Microsoft manages. They give you access to a web app. They rewrote a little bit of the RDP so that it's a more efficient protocol for WVD. They manage the gateway and the broker to connect your end user devices, laptops, tablets, etc., into your VM desktops. And those VM desktops are then managed by you and your partners. They also allow now for remote app, which has come back from the old RDS days. And they integrate with Active Directory, and with their acquisition of SSLogix, now they have a great profile management technology as well. So let's talk then about the workloads. Howard talked, initially about those workloads and planning out your topology, your infrastructure based on those workloads. So for end user computing, workloads are really just the applications and how your end users use those applications, right? So how do you get those applications on the desktop? Microsoft recommends that you keep your desktop, the OS, separate from your applications and your profiles. Great. They manage all the VM compute and storage underneath, but how do you get those workloads there? They do have MSIX and AppAttach that is coming out, and we're partnering with them to further integrate into that aspect as well. But really, I like to think of it as there's two types of workloads, and it really depends on what your target users are trying to do. So, for example, you might have a marketing department, a finance department, an engineering department. Maybe the finance just needs Excel. Okay, that's a simple workload that needs to be delivered. Cloud paging can definitely deliver it. But really where we excel is the more complex use cases, complex workloads. They're not complex because they're rare. On the contrary, they're very common. These are use cases or workloads that a lot of your different end users are going to end up needing. So I'll give some examples of those. Let's say you have some legacy line of business applications. Windows has been around for decades, and because of that, there's a rich number, hundreds of thousands of applications written by either ISVs or in-house homegrown applications. And it's a challenge to get these applications to continue to work, and yet they're business critical a lot of times for them to work. So for example, you may have an ERP application that needs an old version of Java to run. How do you bring that to a modern desktop like Windows 10 and not affect other applications? Another great aspect of Windows is the ability for applications to interact. Unlike maybe on Android or some other newer devices, Windows really has a rich environment for those applications. So again, maybe you have a marketing team and they're using Photoshop, which has plugins. And everybody has their own favorite plugin they wish. Or maybe you have an engineering team that has that needs CAD applications. And these CAD applications can integrate with other applications, such as Autodesk has AutoCAD. It integrates with Bentley's MicroStation. So, how do you deliver those? And the workloads are complex because they're complex to deliver, again, not because they're not common for end users. And then once you have those delivered, how do you keep them updated? You know, for security and compliance, you try to upgrade a dependency like Java, you try to upgrade one of the applications. Because of this tightly interaction of these Windows applications, it's very easy then to break other applications, break the desktop, where it stops functioning, and now it's a lot of maintenance for trying to troubleshoot and solve those issues. You can solve that through possibly having a lot of different images, but then on the back end for IT, you know, it's a nightmare to try to maintain them. You got to pay for space and the cost to keep all those working. This is where cloud paging comes in. This is where really we excel in trying to take these complex workloads and make them simple, so they can be delivered simply like just single applications are. So with that, let me talk a little bit about our technology. The first aspect is we have a container. Within this container, we have a file system. And this is important because when you go from one version of Windows, let's say XP, to Windows 7, you know, that environment changes. Right? The paths change, variables change, and within our file system, within the container, we've abstracted that information. We've made it so that when you take it to a newer operating system, you have a unified and consistent view for that application. So when it's moving from XP to Win 7 or Win 7 to Win 10, from that application standpoint, you know, it still has that consistency, so it can easily migrate. The next aspect of the container is the dispositions. So fundamentally, applications are just made up of files and registry keys. And from that comes things like drivers and services and common interfaces, etc. If you go back to the example of the legacy ERP app, and it has a version of Java, you really don't want other applications to interact with that version of Java. So how do you stop that? Well, with cloud paging, you can isolate just that prereq, just that dependency Java version. That means inside the container, only the ERP application can see it. No other applications on that system will see it. They won't interact with the OS. This really reduces the conflicts and makes it a lot simpler to maintain that application and deliver it. Next, we have the disposition we call integrated. And again, this goes back to that interoperability issue with the complex workload. How do you get apps to really work together? And because we have this as our default, when you add an application to our container, you package it in, they work as natively they would have worked when they were installed. In other words, file associations work and the COM interfaces work. They work as they were intended by the ISV, and yet they're still in a container. So that's also very important for WVD, especially with this multi-session Windows 10, because now you can have a application that's integrated and delivered into one user session, but it doesn't interact with other users in that multi-session environment. So the container is per session. It will interact with other applications in that session, but you really still have that separation. Again, it's trying to make that into a simple workload to provide and deliver. Finally, we have an install disposition, and again, this is just to cover any of those areas that might be more around the OS. So if there's specific drivers that need to be delivered, you can still use cloud paging to deliver them. Again, our vision is to be able to deliver all Windows applications. And so that's really what we've built this container for over all these years, is to make sure that we can do all applications and make those workloads much simpler. So now that you have your application, how do you get it to the desktop? That's the second piece of technology we have, which is really the rapid and secure delivery of these applications to virtual desktops. So fundamentally, if you think of how an application loads from the OS and how it's executed, applications are very large, right, when they're installed. There's no way all that application will be loaded into memory at once. So the OS will load the executable and parts of it as needed, and then it will page fault and page in new information as it needs it to execute. Cloud paging is built on the same fundamental idea, just coming from the cloud. So the initial, in this graphic, you can see maybe the executables are in red, the DLLs are in green, you have some other various files in other colors. It's a very small payload we have to deliver to get that application to run. So we deliver just about 5 to 10% of the application in page fragments to that desktop to get that application running. The rest can come on demand and will trickle in the background. We've built this technology over HTTPS, which means it's very compatible then with all the corporate firewalls and proxies. We also integrate with CDNs such as Azure CDN or SMB file shares such as Azure Files, really to make sure we can get this content as close to the edge, as close to the workloads as required. So you have the rapid delivery, but you still have real-time performance for those applications. And even in a multi-session environment, we cache so that if two users are using the same application, they're not required to page that information twice. It'll already be there for the second user. So this is the rapid delivery. This is how we get those applications to the desktop quickly. And then finally, because we have this container, now we have more asset management, software asset management built around that application and those sets of applications. We talked about provisioning, rapid deployment of those applications. We also have metering. So when that application is running, we know when it's running, how long it's been running for, who's been using it. This gives you a lot of analytics that you can perform on the back end. You know, if you want to optimize your delivery, do some analysis on your IC licenses, really you can use this information for a lot of those aspects. Next is change control. Definitely you can upgrade from one container and just deliver a brand new one. But we also allow patching within our container. So if there's security updates that have to be delivered quickly, you can add those to a container. We will just rapidly deliver the deltas. So they're quickly rolled out to those desktops. And just as importantly, we can roll back. So if you find an application that's not working so well, you can definitely roll those back. Kind of wish I had this in Windows 10 because I get a lot of update problems in my system. The next aspect is the replication of the access to these applications. So if you have an employee that's moved to a different department, you can easily take those applications away because again, they're not installed, they're just in a container. We just easily take that container back. And then importantly for WVD, in our discussion today, is that the transfer. Being able to move off, if you're on a VDI Azure HCI stack today, you can easily move those containers into WVD. So that's a great aspect to all this, is the ability to transfer both to other operating systems and other environments that you might be looking at in the future. Along with this, we also have a full set of APIs and PowerShell commands because we really want to enable the IT to be agile, to really do DevOps work, right? Especially within Azure. So any of these pieces can be leveraged through either PowerShell or API to complete any of this work with provisioning and management and usage of these applications. So now that you've heard a little bit about the technology, let's talk specifically about Windows Virtual Desktops again. The reason we partnered with Microsoft is to really get these applications onto the desktop. So by adding the cloud paging agent into the VM, now really you don't have to worry about those base VMs anymore because you don't want to manage hundreds of base VMs based on different application needs. Now you can just worry about the OS updates to those base images. You don't have to worry as much storage and costs that are associated. It gives you a great way then to, for app compatibility. You can deliver legacy apps. And legacy, again, doesn't have to be old apps. It could be just Win 7 modern apps that you want to quickly move over to WVD from your VDI environment. We've optimized the user experience. So again, with that rapid delivery, we quickly deploy the application without the need to have it affect the login times into the desktop environment. And because of the integration layer, apps work as users are used to and accustomed to working with, right? They'll interact with other applications, file associations work, and again, we want them to have that experience that they're used to and not going to a new, completely different system than they've done all their work on. We integrate with Azure AD domain services, so you can easily provision to sets of users, groups, and machines that you have. We integrate with, again, FS Logic, so you can do your profile management. And this is really great because in WVD, then all their mechanisms they have built for scaling out just work. You know, there's no additional work to be done with cloud paging. You can easily scale up and down as needed for your deployments. Again, I touched on there's no reinstallation of your images, and we securely deliver the application and the data within that application as part of our container and make it available to FS Logic. So this is really why we've partnered with Microsoft, is to help get these, again, more complex workloads onto WVD to make it very simple to manage, especially from an IT point of view. So why choose Numecent? You may, again, not have heard of us. Hopefully you have. We have over 1 million active users. You know, we have a lot in cloud, MSP, system integrators, and some large organizations. I'll give you a couple of example customers. We have one bank that had very old XP applications. The XP has been sunsetted quite a long time ago, and it's very, honestly, a security risk. But they had trouble trying to get their in-house applications to run on Windows 10. And with cloud paging, that was really the only tool that they found successfully they could migrate these applications finally off XP onto a desktop that's fully supported and more secure. The next example is with a large university in the UK. They had been using cloud paging for a while, so all their Windows 7 apps were delivered through cloud paging. And like many companies in the last few years, trying to get to Windows 10, for them was not too difficult, because while they had some issues with the OS and rolling out the OS, applications just seamlessly moved since they were already in cloud paging containers. It was simple to move them over and get their users up and running. So again, that kind of goes back to trying to take those complex workloads and simplify them and making them a lot easier to manage and maintain. So really, the key use cases that I've talked about a little bit here are the applications. Those are the workloads, modernizing them, getting them to deploy into Windows 10, especially Evergreen. A lot of that is still migration work. Windows 10 is great, but there's still versions that come out every 6 months, and it continues to change. And having the ability to keep your applications and not have to fight through app compatibility issues is one of the strong points for cloud paging in Numecent. That goes into the legacy app compatibility. We help with security and compliance because we can rapidly deliver those updates, and who is using them. We can easily take those applications away from users and or desktops. We do the software asset management for license cost and control, and make it so that you can really reduce your desktop images by knowing what's been provisioned and how to provision it. And really it comes down to that we try to maximize application compatibility so you can always take your applications and move them onto a modern desktop like WVD. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Howard.
Hey, thank you, Doug. I actually have a couple quick questions for you. Listening to your presentation inspired a lot of questions because I talked to our enterprise customer quite a bit. We have many banks across the world that's deploying on-premise solution. We really haven't had a conversation with them about application yet because it's not something that we touch. But as we continue to work with partners like yourself, we have university, big colleges. So in the case today, you talked about WPD, but in reality, your technology really could help them transition from, let's say, a university had thousands of students using apps into an environment where the application could be seamlessly transferred to a new environment that they can always use. So it really applies not just to a cloud or WPD, it could apply across multiple environments as well, right?
It definitely can, yeah. So when we developed cloud paging, again, we developed it in mind of wanting to do all Windows apps and really to unmanaged machines. And when you can accomplish that, then going to managed machines is just a lot simpler. So yes, within the universities, we deliver to a lot of students with bring your own devices. And that just makes it a lot easier because again, we simplify those complex deliveries into something much more easily deployed and maintained within our container.
You say container. Container, it's one of the key technology that our customer continue to talk about. I guess the question is, for all the customer that's listening and will be listening, if they did not have your technology available, what would be the challenge they face? Is it just time? Is it just doesn't work? What are some of the challenges that you heard your customer overcome because of your solution?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's really the cost aspects because you can try to do this even just traditionally with installs. But let's say you have Photoshop with a bunch of plugins. Okay, that might be one image that you maintain for a certain number of users. Now you have to spin up infrastructure, VMs just for those groups of users. Now let's say that they want to use a different application, and you have to give that same set of applications. Now you have licensing issues because you have to purchase license for all those same users. And it just kind of spins out of control from there on because now you have a lot more associated costs, both in physical costs and just people hours you have to spend on these issues.
So for those people, customer that's listening, for your customer who have deployed your solution, what did they say about, what did they say? Did they say money, time? What are some of the things you heard about from your customer that they really felt that having this technology helped them in what?
Both. They're definitely a lot more efficient in their IT staff because they can now, without needing to scale up the staff, we've given them the tools to work more efficiently. Again, this is sort of the DevOps side of things that by having those PowerShell commands and having this cloud paging technology, you can have a single IT person manage a lot more machines and users because they have the right tools to do the work. We also have customers that have come back to us and said, well, just because of the analytics we have on the usage, they've saved hundreds of thousands because of licensing costs, and that they could go back and see, okay, really who's using it? I don't have to put that application on every user's desktop just because I don't want to manage all these separate images.
Wow, this is great, and I think, I'm so glad I brought you here today to talk about your technology because this is something that as we continue to talk to our infrastructure customers and many out there, this is definitely something we believe they're facing, and knowing that there's technology like you guys that's available to help them, I think is great. I'm not sure if we can answer this question from the audience. Seems I cannot answer it. Maybe someone could take a stab at it. How much Azure storage do you think you would need to accommodate in the cache in WVD? Henry or Doug, anybody can answer this? If we can, we could table it and we could get back to them.
It really depends on the applications. So at least using cloud paging, you have different options you can use. Like I said, we provision from a set of cloud paging servers, so you'll need some storage for the application on there. The applications are compressed, so they're definitely not as large as what they would have been when they were installed, when they are in storage. And then it just depends on, for the average storage, again, it would be at least as much as, they compress about 50% or so, depending on the app. So again, it relates back to those applications that you have.
Makes sense. Yeah, so, as a wrap up, by partnering with DataON, our goal is to help customers really rationalize the infrastructure application development. As they continue to refresh their solution and make sure that their architecture, infrastructure, application works in the current modern environment for their workers. I think it's important to understand that there's infrastructure side of it, there's an application side of it, and our ability to work with partners like Numecent allows us to deliver those solutions for you. As DataON, we've been doing this for a long time, for 30 years, for modernizing ITs. We have many customers, but for us, the key is making sure we solve those problems using technology, working with partners like Microsoft, Intel, and Numecent, delivering value-added services like management, like Must, and making sure our solution are tested, validated, certified, and we deliver that complete turnkey solution to our customer, so there's a peace of mind. So really, DataON is that vendor that we hope to continue to work with them, and the solution really has been proven in the marketplace. With Microsoft specifically, both DataON and Numecent is a Microsoft partner. Microsoft continue to deliver innovative solution, and the solution we talked about today, called Azure Stack HCI, is really a visionary solution on the Gartner Magic Quadrant, right? They've been doing this for a long time, and our customer are really deploying it as well. We want to make sure when we go to customer as DataON that we deliver a complete end-to-end hybrid cloud computing experience that includes infrastructure, business continuity for backup and DR, also management, making sure you have the ability to manage your infrastructure and deliver that service as well. So really, it's a complete turnkey solution that we deliver to our enterprise customers. We have building blocks. These building blocks are the latest technology from technology vendors like Intel, Western Digital, Mellanox. That really is the best breed of the solution to ensure that your infrastructure has the capability to run your workload seamlessly. Finally, we hope to go on this journey with you, along with our partner Numecent, to continue to help you to modernize your app, refresh your infrastructure, leveraging the latest technology from Microsoft to ensure you have the right solution in place. Many use cases. Please visit our websites for the use cases. We have use cases on SQL, use cases for Edge, use cases for VDI, RDS. Please visit them, because a lot of our customers are deploying these solutions, and we want to share those experiences with you as well. As a final wrap up, I guess, Doug, if you have to remind the audience a couple things to remember about Numecent and your cloud technology, what would you say?
Well, again, it's around those workloads for end-user computing. If you're trying to efficiently deliver, manage, maintain them, then that's really what cloud paging can help with, especially again, sort of those complex cases that are very common, but are difficult to do with traditional methods.
Excellent. And thank you, Doug. Thank you, Henry, for presenting. The webinar will be recorded, and many people will revisit them and review them in the future. If you have any questions, feel free feel free to reach out to us, DataON and Numecent. You have our contact information. Yeah, and we hope to see you. I think there's one more slide. Yes, I added the slide. So for those that want to get a free DataON T-shirt, email us. And say, hey, I'm interested. I want to talk more about application delivery from Numecent. We'll talk about infrastructure for Azure Stack HCI. Just email us at sales@dataonstorage.com, and we'll mail you a free DataON T-shirt. It's really cool looking. A lot of people here are wearing it. So looking forward to engage with all of you, and looking forward to working with all our customers. Thank you very much, and have a great, wonderful weekend, and stay safe. Thank you, Doug, and thank you, Henry.
Thank you, everyone.